"I need money," Mr. Mike said, his voice thick with desperation. "I need more money." "We can't just sit back and do nothing," Mrs. Ruth added, her voice laced with frustration. The 20 million they had received from selling Maria was gone. How could it have lasted? After all, it was money made from someone's pain, at the cost of a life that had once been loved and cherished. They had squandered it all on extravagant living, without any thought of the future. They had no idea if Maria was alive or not, but they never bothered to reach out to her. The reality of their dwindling fortune hit them hard. With nothing left and no way to continue their lavish lifestyle, they had only one option left: show up at Jeff's house and demand more. A few weeks had passed since the shocking events at the party. Life seemed to have settled down for Jeff and Maria. They had found peace, and their bond had grown stronger each day. But that peace was about to be shattered. One afternoon, Jeff sat in his living room, deep in thought, when there was an unexpected knock at the door. He had already been informed of the arrival of Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth, and despite the tension building in his chest, he reluctantly gave the approval for them to enter. As the door opened, Jeff's eyes narrowed when he saw the familiar faces of Maria's uncle and aunt. Their expressions were cold, demanding. Mr. Mike stepped forward with a purposeful stride, while Mrs. Ruth followed closely behind, her eyes scanning the room, still expecting to be treated with the same reverence she had grown accustomed to. Without wasting any time, Mr. Mike got straight to the point. "I need money," he said, his voice thick with desperation. "I need more money." Jeff's eyes widened slightly, confused by the audacity of the request. "I don't owe you anything," he replied calmly, his voice controlled. "What money are you talking about?" Mr. Mike stood firm, his voice growing louder and more demanding. "The 20 million is gone, and you have the money to help us keep up. So why not comply? You've got plenty of it. Why not just give us another 20 million? It's nothing to you, Jeff. It's not like you'll even feel it." Mrs. Ruth, ever the entitled one, added her voice with a sneer. "Why are you so stingy, Jeff? You're one of the richest men in the city. You can easily give us another 20 million without even thinking about it." Jeff clenched his jaw, anger rising under the surface. He had already given them 20 million as agreed, and now they had the nerve to show up at his door demanding more. The nerve of them. Maria, from her room, overheard the conversation. Her heart sank as she heard her uncle and aunt ask for more money. She blinked back the tears that threatened to spill. They had come to sell her again, just as they had done before, but this time, there was no way Jeff would give in. And that thought, knowing that Jeff wouldn't allow them to control her again, filled her with an odd sense of relief. Despite everything, she felt her heart soar with happiness, knowing Jeff wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Jeff's voice broke through the tension, sharp and firm. "I'm not giving you anything," he said, his voice cold with finality. "You sold your niece to me, someone who was supposed to be your family, and now you show up at my house asking for more money. You've already taken enough. I've done nothing but take care of Maria, and yet you think I owe you more." Mr. Mike leaned in, his voice taking on a threatening tone. "You're pushing me, Mr. Jeff," he said, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "You've got 3 days. If I don't see the 20 million in 3 days, there will be consequences. I'll make sure you regret this." Jeff stood his ground, his anger rising, but he refused to show fear. "What will happen? Do your worst," he replied, his words coming out with a sharp edge. "You sold your niece to me, and yet you think you can come here and blackmail me for more money? You've already stripped away her dignity, and now you want more? You have no shame." He paused, his voice growing colder. "Get lost. Get out of my house." Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth stared at Jeff for a long moment, the silence thick with tension. Finally, Mr. Mike scoffed, his face twisted in resentment. "You'll regret this," he muttered, before turning and storming toward the door. Mrs. Ruth followed him without another word, her eyes still filled with a sense of entitlement, as if they had been wronged in some way. But it was clear to Jeff that their greed had no limits. As the door slammed shut behind them, Jeff stood there for a long time, fuming with frustration. The nerve of those two. He had given them more than enough, and yet they still wanted more. But there was no way he was going to let them get away with blackmailing him. Maria, who had been listening quietly from her room, wiped the tears from her eyes. She could hear the anger in Jeff's voice, the way he stood up to her family. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of security, of protection. Jeff had proven time and time again that he cared for her, that he wouldn't let anyone take advantage of her, and that thought made her heart swell with warmth. She stepped out of her room, slowly walking toward Jeff. When he saw her, his expression softened, his anger still simmering beneath the surface. "You're safe, Maria," he said quietly, his voice filled with determination. "They can't hurt you anymore." Maria smiled faintly, her eyes still red from the tears. "Thank you, Jeff," she whispered, "for everything." Jeff walked over to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. You're family, and I'll protect you, no matter what." For the first time in a long while, Maria felt like she truly had a home. The weight of her past seemed to fade in that moment, replaced by the love and protection Jeff had shown her. He had stood up to her family, refused to be blackmailed, and had shown her what true care and affection were. She no longer felt like a burden. She felt seen. She felt loved. The silence between Jeff and Maria lingered for a moment before Jeff broke it, his voice heavy with regret. "Maria, I have been so ashamed of my actions," he began, his eyes avoiding hers for a moment as he collected his thoughts. "I know you're not aware, but I bought you from your uncle for 20 million. I'm truly sorry. I was a man who believed money could buy anything. I found you beautiful, and I loved the melody you played on the piano. I was moved by it, and so I offered money in exchange for you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. I never saw how wrong it was until now." Maria's heart twisted at his words, but she didn't let her emotions show. Instead, she smiled softly, taking his hand and rubbing it gently. "I found out about the transaction, Jeff," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I knew you bought me. I overheard them talking about it. But right now, I'm glad you did. I'm glad I was sold for a price to someone who loves and values me." Jeff was taken aback by her words. It was all beginning to make sense. The coldness she had shown him at first, the distance she kept it, had all stemmed from the shock and betrayal of being bought, of being treated like a commodity. But hearing her now, seeing the acceptance in her eyes, made him realize that she had understood the situation long before he had. "I didn't know, Maria," he whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know the pain I caused you. I thought I was doing what was best, but I wasn't. I am so sorry." Maria hugged him tightly, not saying anything at first. She could feel the weight of his words, the sincerity in them, and it made her heart ache. She understood, now, more than ever, that Jeff had never intended to hurt her. He had made a mistake, yes, but it was clear that he had changed. He had done everything he could to make her feel loved and wanted since then. "I'm here now, Jeff," Maria whispered softly, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "You don't need to apologize. You've done more for me than anyone else ever has, and I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for you." As Jeff's tears began to fall, Maria felt his body tremble in her arms. For the first time, Jeff let go of the walls he had built around himself. The guilt, the shame, all of it came flooding out as he sobbed in her arms. Maria held him, her hand patting his back gently, offering him comfort and reassurance. "Shh, it's okay," she murmured, her voice soothing as she continued to hold him. "You don't need to carry this alone. You've already made things right. You love me and I love you. That's all that matters." Jeff's sobs quieted as he lay there, his head resting on her chest, his breathing slowing. The exhaustion of holding everything in for so long finally caught up with him. Maria held him, not minding the tears that stained her own cheeks. She had never seen him like this before, vulnerable, broken, and finally allowing himself to feel. In the quiet of the room, Maria continued to gently pat his back, comforting him until he finally drifted off to sleep in her arms. She stayed awake for a while longer, watching over him as he slept peacefully. His body relaxed for the first time in weeks. As she held him close, Maria realized something deep within her heart. She had been through so much, but she had also found something beautiful in the process. She had found someone who cared for her, who saw her as more than just a blind girl, someone who had been willing to go to great lengths to make her feel loved and cherished. And now, as she sat there holding him, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She wasn't just a woman who had been bought and sold. She was Maria, someone worthy of love, and she had found that love in the most unexpected of places. A week passed, and despite Mr. Mike's demands, no 20 million had been sent from Jeff. His patience was wearing thin, and as expected, he resorted to extreme measures to get what he wanted. Without hesitation, Mr. Mike took the matter public. He called out to the media, eager to tarnish Jeff's reputation and put pressure on him. The story quickly spread, as Mr. Mike had planned, flooding the airwaves, news outlets, and social media. The headlines screamed with shocking accusations, each one more salacious than the last. Billionaire Jeffrey accused of exploiting family. Has Jeffrey fallen victim to his wild fantasies about disabled women? The truth about the blind girl sold to Jeffrey. A web of lies and greed. The narrative painted Jeff as a man who had used his wealth to take advantage of a poor, vulnerable family, and some speculated that his relationship with Maria was born of a twisted obsession with disabled women. The accusations were wild, false, and damaging, but the media didn't care. They were eager to create a sensational story. The story spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of opinions and judgment. People on social media voiced their shock and outrage, some condemning Jeff for his actions, while others took his side, unable to fully believe the rumors. Regardless of the truth, the damage had already been done. Jeff's name was now tied to scandal, and there was no escaping it. But Jeff and Maria were not afraid. They knew the truth, and together they decided they would face the media head-on. They would address the accusations and set the record straight. Jeff and Maria had been through so much, but this was different. They could feel the weight of the media frenzy pressing down on them. Despite the lies being spread about Jeff, they knew they couldn't hide forever. It was time to face the storm head-on. Jeff sat down with Maria in the living room, his mind racing. He had always avoided the spotlight, preferring to keep his personal life out of the public eye. But now, with the media attacking his character, he had no choice but to speak out. "Maria," Jeff said softly, looking into her eyes, "we can't let them get away with this. They're twisting the truth, making it something ugly. We have to set the record straight." Maria nodded, her heart swelling with pride at his words. She knew how much this weighed on him, but she also knew they had nothing to hide. "You've always been there for me, Jeff," she said, her voice steady. "And now, it's my turn to stand by you." With a determined look in his eyes, Jeff made the decision. He would hold a press conference. He would answer every question, clear up the lies, and tell the world the truth. It would be a long day, but it was necessary. The day of the press conference arrived, and the media was in full force. News outlets, reporters, and cameras crowded around the location Jeff had chosen. It was a large, neutral space, a far cry from the luxurious environments that had been painted in the media. Jeff and Maria stood side by side, their hands subtly intertwined, showing their united front. The journalists took their seats, eager for answers. The room grew silent as Jeff and Maria took the stage. Jeff stood behind the podium, Maria standing by his side, her presence calm and resolute. Jeff began, his voice steady but firm. "I know there's been a lot of misinformation circulating, and I'm here today to address the accusations being made against me, and more importantly, against Maria." The reporters leaned in, their eyes fixed on him, ready to catch every word. "There are rumors saying I bought Maria, that I somehow used my wealth to manipulate and exploit her. Let me make this clear. I did not buy Maria as a commodity. Yes, I gave money to her uncle, but that was never for her. It was an agreement I made with him out of respect for Maria's well-being, and it was intended to provide for her, not to own her." Maria stepped forward, her voice clear as she addressed the room. I knew about the money, and I knew about the deal. I overheard my uncle and aunt talking about it, but that doesn't matter now. What matters is that Jeff didn't buy me like a possession. He took me in when I had nothing. He didn't treat me like a burden or a transaction, he treated me like a person. He loved me, and he continues to show me that love every day. The reporters exchanged glances, their eyes softening as they saw the truth in Maria's words. Jeff's gaze never wavered. His hands clenched around the podium, but his heart swelled with pride. Maria's strength had always been there, hidden beneath her vulnerability. Now, it was shining through. Jeff continued, addressing the media head-on. I love Maria, and I've always loved her for who she is, not for her blindness, not for her past, but for her spirit, her heart, and the way she has changed my life. Everything I've done for her has been because I care. This relationship is built on love, not money or manipulation. The room fell silent for a moment as the reporters absorbed the weight of his words. For the first time, they saw the genuine connection between Jeff and Maria. The press conference was supposed to be a chance for Jeff and Maria to finally clear the air, to make sure the world understood their truth. But just as the tension seemed to settle, a voice rang out from the crowd, snapping everyone's attention to the source. Maria is being manipulated! Mr. Mike screamed, his voice filled with rage and bitterness. The room went silent, all eyes now fixed on him as he stood near the back, his face red with anger. The reporters' cameras turned toward him, catching every word, every reaction. Jeff's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the familiar face of Maria's uncle. But before he could say anything more, something unexpected happened. Maria, who had been wearing dark sunglasses the entire time, suddenly reached up and pulled them off. The room fell into complete silence. Gasps echoed through the crowd as everyone stared at her, unsure of what to expect next. I can see, Maria said, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet confidence. The room was filled with shock. Mr. Mike's eyes widened, unsure of what was happening. He had been so used to Maria's blindness, to seeing her navigate the world in a way that was different from anyone else. But now, as she stood there, looking around, her eyes shining with newfound life, the realization hit him like a wave. How is that possible? Mr. Mike whispered under his breath, his face a mix of confusion and disbelief. Maria turned her gaze toward him, her expression calm but firm. It was the love you sold me to that restored my sight, she said, her words cutting through the room like a sharp knife. She then looked at Jeff, her face softening. Jeff, you are the best thing that ever happened to me since I lost my parents. You're the only one who saw me, not my blindness, and you did everything in your power to make me see you and see what you see. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The reporters, who had been skeptical and ready to pounce, now found themselves speechless, unable to process what they had just heard. Suddenly, someone in the back of the room called out, "We love Jeff!" The words were a rallying cry, and before long, more voices joined in. "We love Jeff!" the crowd echoed, some even applauding, others nodding in approval. The overwhelming support and love from the audience became impossible to ignore. As the crowd's energy shifted, the bond between Jeff and Maria became undeniable. The way they looked at each other, the warmth and trust between them, was clear to everyone in the room. There was no illusion, no game, just two people who had been through unimaginable hardships and had found something real in each other. The reporters began firing questions at Jeff, eager to dive deeper into their relationship. But Jeff, standing strong beside Maria, remained calm and composed. With Maria's hand resting gently on his arm, he answered each question with grace, explaining how he had helped Maria, how he had supported her, and how their bond was more profound than anyone could have imagined. Maria is not a victim. She is not someone to be pitied, Jeff said, his voice steady but filled with pride. She is a woman who has overcome so much, and I am fortunate to have her in my life. We're not just a story for the media. This is real. Our love is real. The press conference continued, but the dynamic had shifted. What started as a moment of crisis had turned into something much more powerful. Jeff and Maria were no longer just defending themselves, they were celebrating the truth, the love they had found in each other. As the conference drew to a close, Jeff and Maria stood together, their hearts lighter than they had been in weeks. They had faced the storm head-on, and now the weight of the world seemed to lift, even if just for a moment. They had told their truth, and that was all that mattered. "We're ready for whatever comes next," Maria whispered, her voice full of conviction. Jeff turned to her, a smile breaking across his face. "As long as we're together, we can face anything." Hand in hand, they walked out of the conference room, their bond stronger than ever. The world outside may have judged them, but they had each other, and that was all they needed. As Jeff and Maria stood together, outside the conference hand in hand, the room filled with a quiet but undeniable energy. The press conference had gone better than they could have imagined. But now, the media's attention shifted. The reporters, no longer interested in chasing their own wild stories, turned their cameras toward the two figures who had started all of this, Mike and his wife, Mrs. Ruth. The reporters, hungry for the truth, swarmed around them. "How do you feel now that your niece, whom you sold for $20 million, is standing in front of the world, proving that her life was not something to be bought?" One reporter asked, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth were caught off guard. Their faces reddened, and they looked like cornered animals, uncertain of what to do or say next. The cameras flashed, capturing every moment as the public saw them for what they truly were: greedy and heartless. "How could you sell your own flesh and blood like that?" Another reporter pressed, shoving a microphone in Mr. Mike's face. "How does it feel to be exposed as a family willing to put a price on your niece's life?" The silence hung in the air as Mr. Mike opened and closed his mouth, but no words came. Mrs. Ruth, who had always been so confident and entitled, stood frozen, her eyes darting from one camera to another, her hands shaking. "You've been deceiving the public about your niece's situation, but now the truth is out. How do you justify what you did?" The questions came faster, more forceful, as the reporters closed in on them. The media had found their story, and they weren't going to let it go easily. For the first time, Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth felt the sting of their own actions. The very people they had tried to deceive were now shining a spotlight on their cruelty. The weight of their greed was suffocating, and they couldn't escape it. As the barrage of questions continued, Mr. Mike's face twisted in frustration. "This is all a misunderstanding," he sputtered, but his words lacked conviction. "I did what I thought was best. I needed the money." But the reporters weren't having it. "Best for whom?" One reporter shot back. "You sold your niece for money. You didn't think about her, did you?" Mrs. Ruth's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of regret, just tears of anger and frustration. She had always believed that wealth and power could shield her from the consequences of her actions. Now, standing in front of the world, she realized how wrong she had been. The couple was humiliated, and the media made sure the public knew it. The storm of backlash was swift and unforgiving. Their lies were laid bare for everyone to see, and there was no escaping the shame of what they had done. Jeff, however, stood back from the scene, his posture calm and composed. He could have had them arrested. He could have let the law take its course. But he didn't want the drama. He had already been through enough. The only thing that mattered to him now was Maria and the peace they had finally found together. Later that evening, as Jeff drove home, Maria sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his. The storm of the day was behind them now, and they were leaving it all in the past. Jeff glanced at her, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You handled that beautifully, Maria," he said softly, his eyes returning to the road. Maria smiled back at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and love. "I never thought I would have the strength to do something like that," she replied. "But with you by my side, I know I can face anything." As they pulled into their driveway, the house they shared together felt like a sanctuary. The world outside could be full of noise and chaos, but inside, it was just the two of them. They had been through so much, but now they were stronger than ever. They walked inside, Maria resting her head on Jeff's shoulder as they passed through the door. Life, it seemed, was finally beginning to settle. Despite the trials they had faced, they had each other, and that was more than enough. Mr. Mike and his wife, Mrs. Ruth, returned home in disgrace, their once proud demeanor shattered. The neighbors who had once looked up to them now saw them for who they truly were: greedy, manipulative, and heartless. The facade they had worked so hard to maintain was now gone, and the truth had come crashing down on them. Every passing day reminded them of the lies they had told, the pain they had caused, and the fact that everyone now knew how they had gained and lost their wealth. Their son, Matthew, was not spared either. The whispers spread quickly through the town, and the shame of his parents' actions clung to him as well. The money they had made by selling Maria had evaporated just as quickly as it had arrived, and the once privileged family was now just another cautionary tale, their reputation forever tarnished. Meanwhile, Maria and Jeff had found a rare peace, one that had taken them both time to build. Their love for each other grew stronger every day, untouched by the chaos that had once surrounded them. Welcome to Tales by NFC. We are glad to have you all around. We love and appreciate you all. This story is solely ours, and we ask that you be cautious of fake channels pretending to be us. Just like we share these stories, that's how human nature can be unpredictable and mean. People will take what's ours and make it their own, but we will never stop creating. Thank you for your continued support. If you are just joining us, please subscribe, like, and comment where you are watching from. Now, back to Maria and Jeff's love story. Over a quiet dinner one evening, Maria nervously played with her food, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. She had been practicing her piano skills non-stop for weeks, preparing for an upcoming competition. As she looked at Jeff, she finally spoke up, breaking the silence. "I have a competition coming up next month," she whispered, her voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "It's a piano show, and lots of people will be there. I'm nervous, but excited too." Jeff looked at her, pride shining in his eyes. He knew how much this meant to her. Her journey from the pain of blindness to now competing on a stage, her skills sharper than ever, was a testament to her strength. But his mind was occupied with something else. The proposal he had been planning for weeks. The perfect moment to ask Maria to be his wife. "Oh, you don't have to be nervous," Jeff said, his voice warm with confidence. "I know you'll handle it just so well." His words were meant to reassure her, but his mind was lost in his own thoughts, envisioning the perfect way to ask her the most important question of his life. Maria studied him closely, noticing how distant he seemed. "You seemed lost," she said, her voice a little more curious than before. Jeff snapped out of his thoughts, realizing that she had caught him zoning out. He hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Oh, that. I," he muttered, unsure of what to say, before finally blurting out, "I love you, Maria." Maria smiled, her heart warming at his words. She could always count on him to make her feel cherished, to remind her of his love in the simplest yet most meaningful ways. "You always know how to get to me," she said, her voice soft with affection. But inside, Jeff felt the weight of his own thoughts, the desire to make things official, to seal their bond in a way that was more permanent than words. He knew that after everything they had been through, after how far they had come together, this was the moment. The proposal would have to wait until after her competition, but he had already planned the perfect way to ask. The thought of asking Maria to be his wife, for her to say yes, was the only thing he could think about. As they finished their dinner, Jeff couldn't help but smile as Maria looked at him with a teasing glint in her eyes. She had no idea what he was planning, but Jeff was determined to make their love story even more beautiful. Weeks had passed, and finally, the day of Maria's competition arrived. She stood before the mirror, dressed in a stunning white gown, her hair elegantly styled, and her heart racing with both excitement and nervousness. She looked breathtaking, every inch a picture of grace and beauty. But beneath the surface, it wasn't just the competition that had her on edge. It was the moment that Jeff had been waiting for, the moment he was about to make his proposal to her. As the competition began, contestants took their turns one by one, each showcasing their musical talent. But Jeff's mind wasn't on the others. He sat in the audience, his eyes focused solely on Maria. Every now and then, he reached into his pocket, making sure the ring box was still there. He had gone all out, spending weeks at the best diamond store, carefully choosing the ring that would symbolize the love and commitment he felt for her. His heart pounded with anticipation. Soon, the moment Maria had been waiting for arrived. It was her turn to perform. As she walked onto the stage, there was an almost ethereal presence about her. The crowd fell silent as she sat down at the grand piano. She adjusted herself, her fingers brushing the keys for a moment before lifting the microphone to her lips. "This is dedicated to my husband Jeff, and my late parents," she said, her voice steady, though filled with emotion. Then, with a deep breath, she let her fingers glide over the piano keys. The music that filled the room was soft yet powerful, a melody that seemed to carry the weight of all she had been through, the sorrow, the pain, but also the incredible love she had found in Jeff. It was a melody that acknowledged everything she had lost, but also everything she had gained. As her fingers danced across the piano, every note seemed to speak directly to the hearts of those who had ever hurt her, those who had seen her as less because of her blindness, those who had judged her. The melody was an expression of gratitude for the love she now had, for the family she had gained, and for the strength she had found within herself. The room went completely still. It was as if the world itself paused for those few minutes. People were drawn into the music, feeling it on a deep, emotional level. Jeff's heart stood still, completely mesmerized by Maria's performance. He fell in love with her all over again. In the audience, Mr. Mike and his family were seated, watching from a distance, their faces a mixture of regret and realization. They had come to the competition not to cause trouble, but to acknowledge their past mistakes. The shame of selling Maria, the betrayal, all of it weighed heavily on them now. They had come to see her success, her growth, and, perhaps, to remind themselves that life can change in unexpected ways. The melody continued, its grace and sorrow lingering in the air. It was as if the music itself had become a reflection of Maria's journey. Her rise from the pain of her blindness to standing before the world, shining with talent and grace, had captured everyone's attention. As the last note of the melody echoed through the hall, the room was filled with a quiet, emotional silence. Then, tears began to fall. Some of the audience, moved by the depth of her performance, wiped their eyes, unable to contain the raw emotion Maria's music had stirred. The host of the competition stood and announced, "Maria is the winner!" The crowd erupted into applause, and Maria stood up, scanning the room for Jeff. She didn't see him at first, but as she turned around, something unexpected happened.